Good evening and welcome to Merit TV Canada. My name is David Craig. As every night we continue to analyze and look at what is happening here in Canada in politics, in culture, with issues, analyzing the newly formed Liberal minority government in Canada, watching how they are handling their work, following events that's happening. I want to bring you the latest updates in terms of what is happening in the last 24 hours. Thank you for watching this evening. First and foremost, I want to open up by a big announcement, as you probably have already heard, as there is a new Pope that has been elected, that was voted upon today. And his name is His Holiness Pope Leo the 14th, and it is the first American Pope in Catholic history. It is, as President Donald Trump said, it is a great honor to have an American as a Pope. This is big news with obviously a big shift as this new Pope continues to move forward and lead the Catholic Church. So wanted to start off by stating that. On a little funny note, I did think it was funny, if you do follow the stock market and what's happening in America, is Jim Cramer was right on time with saying the new Pope will not be American. And if you're not sure what the joke is in that, usually you do the opposite of what Jim Cramer does predict when it comes to stocks. Anyways, we're going to continue to move on and analyze Prime Minister Mark Carney and how the Liberal government has been acting, how his first meeting went with President Donald Trump just a couple days ago. We've been seeing a lot of reaction falling out from that. As well, I do want to analyze and look at President Donald Trump's approach into America first, and is this something that Canadians can learn from? The reason why I want to go there is today, President Donald Trump said very confidently, you better buy American stocks. You better invest in America because it's about to skyrocket. And that shows some major confidence coming from a president who is doing work saying we are going to a boom and continue to move forward. And to be honest, I wish that here in Canada, we could have the same confidence to say invest in Canada because you're going to get a great return on investment. So we're going to look at that in just a moment here. But Mark Carney, we've been seeing a lot of some fallout, as well a lot of compliments about his first meeting with President Donald Trump. They had a behind-the-scenes meeting, but then they also had an open meeting where the media and the gallery was available to talk with them. And there's some interesting things coming out as President Donald Trump spoke for over 30 minutes of that meeting, and it looked like Mark Carney spoke between 3 and 4 minutes. I obviously know Mark Carney was sitting in the Oval Office there with President Donald Trump, and he's going to do a majority of the talking. But I'm interested to know, what are your thoughts on how did Mark Carney do? Because the thing that caught me a little bit by surprise was this idea that he ran on anti-Trump sentiment. The Liberal Party was built upon this during the election, is that Trump is an enemy from the South that is trying to impose tariffs and threaten our sovereignty. That is how Mark Carney positioned President Donald Trump. And he had his first meeting, and obviously you want to put your best foot forward. You want to connect. You want to build a relationship. You want to move that direction. But it seemed to be a complete opposite on what he ran on. Are we okay with this idea in Canadian politics that you can just strategically do what you need to do to get into office, even if it is misleading? The whole idea of elbows up. And then you have a little bit of a turn of events in terms of the relationship and the camaraderie that was seen between President Donald Trump and Prime Minister Mark Carney. And so for me, I want to see more transparency. I would love to see more truth. I would love to see politicians be able to be honest and elect that through honesty. But unfortunately, I think our system has shown that doesn't work. But in the sense of this, I'm not sure if overall it was a great success. I wouldn't go as far as the CBC has been saying this is a massive success for Mark Carney. I also would not go as far as stating people who might be politically right and stating it was a complete disaster. Because as we know it, this is part of the problem we have here in Canada, is that we have become tribalistic. We are too narrow-minded to only analyze, to speak, and to give our opinions based on what we want to happen, or maybe where we exist politically, ideologically. That is something we have to stop. I'm going to say that one more time. We have to be able to be better at coming to the table, having open minds, being able to compliment and build up when someone does something that is good, even if they are not politically aligned with us, and also be able to criticize those that we generally agree with when they do something wrong. I thought Mark Carney in his opening statement with President Donald Trump. I thought it was a good olive branch reaching out, saying we want to work together. We're stronger when we do work together. He was complimentary of Donald Trump. I don't like the differences that was shown from the Liberal campaign. I feel like there was deceptive, and I'm definitely not a fan of that. But I thought in terms of meeting and putting a best foot forward, it gave me actually a little bit of hope that they're going to find a way to work together. Another sentiment when it comes to Prime Minister Mark Carney is that he said I think some decent things in sense of moving forward, but I am the type, as Premier Danielle Smith said, action speaks louder than words. We're going to have to see, is he going to move forward to help interprovincial trade? Is he prepared to move forward to help Alberta and help Albertans get what they need here in Canada to feel like they are at the table? I know there's a lot of Albertans who are done with that. I'm still of the hope and the mindset that we can figure out how Alberta can thrive within this context. I'm hopeful for that, but I'll be very critical whether that actually happens or whether that does not happen. One thing, as I only have about a minute left, I want to get to with President Donald Trump, this idea of him being nationalistic, America first, building a strong America, investing America. It's the whole strategy behind his tariff approach. His approach for tariffs is to bring back manufacturing, wealth, and create jobs and put the American worker first so Americans can thrive. He is the president of the United States, not the president of the world. And I think a lot of people outside of America are criticize, saying, well, why are you doing this? But he's trying to put America first. I wish here in Canada that we could get behind the idea of putting Canada first, bringing investment to Canada, building jobs. What are we doing for Canadians of all provinces and all territories to thrive and help Canada move forward? I do think we as Canadians, I do think that our leaders could benefit from this approach of being nationalistic in building Canada, putting Canada first so that we can build and strengthen us economically, strengthen our healthcare, our education, all the things that we as citizens need to thrive. So I do think there are some things that we can learn from this. And it starts off by us making a fine deal and a good deal with the United States so that we can get back to building Canada and having a strong ally in the United States when it comes to trade and the trade talks. There's my 2 cents. We're going to be joined here in just a moment with Peter Stoffer, former NDP MP leader. I'm going to ask him a number of questions about his thoughts on Alberta, Prime Minister Mark Carney, and so on. But would you stick with us, and we'll be back after this break. Welcome back to Merit TV Canada's Election Watch. We are post-election now, and we are in the latter days after Canada came to vote, and we are going to continue analyzing and looking at the events that have unfolded since Canada went to the polls. I am joined today by Peter Stoffer, former MP with the NDP party. Peter, thank you for joining me.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I appreciate that.
Well, it's always great to get some time with you, hear your thoughts and your words of wisdom. I'd love to connect or talk about right away a quick update with the federal NDP party as they have lost their official party status. They have a new interim leader as leader of their party. But I also want to touch on the separation that the provincial party here in Alberta has done from the federal NDP. Would you mind, first off, giving us some comments on that? What are your thoughts on, and take us through those events?
Well, first of all, I think the Alberta NDP did the absolute right thing. I've been advocating now for over 24 years that there be a separate list of party members between provincial parties and the federal party. Right now, if you join so for example, Nova Scotia NDP, you're an automatic member of the federal party. I never agreed with that. I believe the fact that if Mr. Neshi becomes Premier of Alberta, his number one concern would be Albertans, and number two would be Canada. If you're the Prime Minister of Canada, your number one issue is Canada and then the provinces. And so you need to have that separation. And that's one of the things I advocated for in terms of changing the NDP party itself, along with a couple of other things that I've advocated for but have not yet seen them yet. But this is a good first step, and I encourage all other provincial NDP and the Yukon Territorial NDP to do the same thing. Thank
you for sharing that. I didn't realize that you were advocating for that for 24 years ago. So thumbs up for your opinion for what the Alberta NDP has done. Yeah. I want to move our attention to Prime Minister Mark Carney. He's over a week and a half into his continuation as Prime Minister, but now he's an elected member of Parliament as well. I'd love to hear your 10,000-foot take How has he been doing? He obviously had a big meeting with President Donald Trump. He's been moving in that direction. General thoughts, criticisms. How has he done in his first week and a half?
Well, to be very frank with you, I think he's done very, very well so far. Of course, the issue will be he's not going to be able to maintain all the promises that they did during the campaign. They just fiscally do not have the resources to do that. But I do like the idea that he met with Mr. Trump. I like the idea that he's going to meet with the provincial premiers. And I like the idea by, as we said, if you can eliminate the barriers between the provinces, you can go a long way in maintaining and uplifting our economy within the Canadian, the border, within our own nation. And so I think by doing that, for example, getting a pipeline from Alberta past Montreal into New Brunswick, I think would be a great thing to do. Hydroelectricity going, east, west, north, south, wherever it goes, it needs to happen.
Yes.
And I need tradespeople to be able to work anywhere in the country. Things like I mentioned the other day, your driver's license. Our driver's license in Nova Scotia, they're made in Ontario. So why don't we have a Canadian driver's license? Why don't we have a Canadian healthcare card? With the identifier that you're from Alberta or Nova Scotia. These are things that we could do to eliminate a lot of bureaucracy, reduce a lot of waste and costs, save the taxpayers some money, and reinvent that money into things that really help Canadians and young people maintain good, solid jobs, look after our seniors and the environment, and really move forward without having to rely on the United States or think about the United States, and at the same time look for other markets around the world. So I think Mr. Carney has a really, really difficult job in front of him, but I do wish him the best, and I hope that the premiers as well will work together to solve these issues.
A quick question, something you mentioned there. As Canada is a federation and we operate on the idea of the separation of powers between provincial and federal, and obviously a federation at the time was a radical idea coming together, trying to maintain the uniqueness and the identity of each individual aspect across Canada, but coming together for Canada. You mentioned a couple of those things regarding provinces having autonomy. You mentioned, and they're small items like driver's license. Why not Canada-wide? Do you think that would attribute to more of that the federation maybe not having as much, provinces not having as much autonomy in the general Federation of Canada? Any thoughts on that?
Well, I think the provinces themselves have an awful lot of power in terms of what they do in their natural resources, in terms of their taxation policies, etc., in that regard. But I think it's time now, if the provinces really want to boost their trade, for example, with other provinces, you need to knock down those barriers.
Yes.
I mean, yes, we have a border between BC and Alberta, but really, do we really have one? Do we need one in that regard when it comes to trade and the movement of goods and services? No.
Yeah.
And like I said before, we have very good wine products here in Nova Scotia. You have very good wine products in the Okanagan in BC. Why can't I buy a lot of Okanagan wine here and you folks out west buy Nova Scotia wine there? We don't need to have wines coming from around the world. We have good quality products here, and these are just some of the things that we could do to knock down those barriers. But I think that eventually provinces are going to have to do that because most provinces are in debt. Yeah. Most provinces are running huge deficits as well. And in order to reduce that, you're going to have to reduce costs and reduce bureaucracies. And the best way to do it is by working together instead of against each other.
Yeah, I very much agree with that. And I think we'll get to this a little bit further down the road, talking about the rise of Alberta independence, because obviously with natural energy, what you're proposing, and I think a lot of people are advocating for, increased interprovincial trade answers some of those questions and helps provide a solution to bringing Canada back together. I want to go back just for a quick moment to Mark Carney, Prime Minister Mark Carney's first visit with President Donald Trump. And something that kind of struck me is I watched it actually a couple of times. And in my honest opinion, I noticed a little bit, it seemed like there was a camaraderie and a friendship, which I think is good in the sense of Mark Carney trying to put his best foot forward and repair relationships and move forward. Because whether we like it or not, we are married at the hip with the United States and will continue to be. And this is a speed bump we're going through, and we'll figure it out. But the thing that I kind of caught me off guard a little bit was Prime Minister Mark Carney and the Liberals ran on this idea of anti-American sentiment and making some bold statements regarding our relationship as we know it with the United States is over, and some statements like that. And I've just seen a little bit of an uptick of this idea. He ran on anti-American sentiment, but now seems to have perception is that he's done maybe a 180 pivot. Do you have thoughts on that? Was that just political strategy to get in, or is he really just trying to repair the road as best as he can? How would you have handled that?
Well, sir, as you probably are fully aware, what you say in a campaign doesn't necessarily mean you're going to do that in government. It's to get elected. And right during the campaign, as you know, anti-Trump sentiment, I don't think it was necessarily anti-American.
Yeah,
it was the anti-Trump administration that was very front and center. Who's the best person to deal with this guy? And the people of Canada chose Mark Carney.
That's right.
And I think I said on your previous show, regardless of what people think, the Americans are our best friends, they are our best trading partner, and they always will be. Yes, you are absolutely correct. This is a speed bump, a pretty big speed bump on the road to that prosperity. But I understand why Donald Trump is doing what he's doing, and I understand why Mark Carney is doing what he's doing. But Mark Carney said it correctly, and many other people have said it before. If we work together as nations, we are stronger in terms of our security, we are stronger in terms of our economy, and we are stronger in terms of our democracy if we work together. And that's the key. Regardless of what people think about the Americans, I know that the vast majority of Canadians respect and really like the American people and their country. Right now, we've just got a few people that are in there that are acting a little silly, I guess, is to put it politely. And eventually, that'll pass, and we'll hopefully get back to the way we were. But having said that, the one thing that Donald Trump has done that we should thank him for is he's awakened the Canadian psyche. Are you an Albertan? Am I a Nova Scotian? Or are we a Canadian first? I'm a Canadian first, and then I live in Nova Scotia. And I believe if more people thought like a country, then we could really solve some of our issues that we have and don't become so provincialized in your sort of power struggles that the provinces are having in this regard. I think we need to think as a country, to be frank with you.
Yeah, and the idea of working together and coming together, I would agree with you in the sense of we want to make Canada strong and working for all provinces and coming to the table to have those conversations. And one of the unfortunate things I've seen over the last, call it decade, is this inability to come to the table and have constructive conversations. And that's something I think you and I both agree on. We need to be able to get back to doing that so that we can create a strong Canada where all provinces are prospering and working together for the betterment of Canada, where all wins. I want to move just briefly on this topic to Alberta, because in Alberta, there has been this Alberta independence, Alberta separation sentiment, which has been rising. I know a lot of people personally who are done or feel done with this idea of Ottawa not representing or being treated. They have this idea of not being treated fairly, and then I think there's a lot of ideas that they can probably say we need to relook and get back to the drawing board. Premier Danielle Smith has essentially made 4 demands in her address on Monday to the federal government about things that they would like to see. They include access to tidewater ports, the Arctic, Atlantic, Pacific. They include interprovincial trade as a paraphrase. They also include being able to get our energy out, several things. I want to get your thoughts initially on Premier Smith, and as a Premier of Alberta, how should a leader be handling this when you represent Albertans, but also you are a province, a part of the Federation, wanting to have Canada be able to prosper and work together? She made it clear she doesn't want to separate, but she's willing to walk down the path if the citizens of Alberta want to move that direction. Thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, I grew up in British Columbia in the Yukon, and I remember the Western Separation Party of the 70s. So this is not a new argument they're having. But it's really unfortunate that 50 years later, we're revisiting these arguments again. I understand Danielle Smith's frustration, and I know very well that they're paying the bulk of our transfer payments here in Atlantic Canada and across the country. And so when you're the banker of the country right now, you do have a right to be a little frustrated sometimes when you don't think you're getting your full share that Albertans believe that they deserve. And you're right, access to tidewater parts should not be an argument. British Columbia, Atlantic Canada, wherever, they should be able to work with Alberta to get this done and work not just have Alberta do it on their own, but work together to get the federal government to make it happen. And I would say to the good people of Quebec that my wife is from as well, that they receive over $2 billion extra in transfer payments every year, at least the last time that I checked.
Yeah.
And that money mostly comes from the West. And the West has a right. There's a pipeline that goes to Montreal. They have a right to argue the point fairly that it's probably better, in fact, it is a lot better, to have a pipeline extend to St. John, New Brunswick, because the oil is moving by train, and it shouldn't go by train. It should go by pipeline. And that way we in Atlantic Canada might be able to be burning Alberta gas instead of Saudi Arabian or Venezuelan gas.
Yeah.
And that promotes more jobs, more economy, and eventually, yes, fossil fuels will be off the table and we'll be into the area where we're relying on renewable energies and stuff. But before we get to that day, I think if we're going to use fossil fuels, natural gas or oil, we need to use Canadian resources for Canadian industries and Canadian homes.
And there's an argument to be made as well that the more that we promote Canadian energy is that we actually raise the standard worldwide in terms of the standard of doing it in a way that's best for our planet. And we have pretty high standards when you compare to some other countries. We just have about 1 minute left. And on that note, if you have a message for people of Alberta who maybe are in the camp already, we want to separate, we're independent, or maybe they're on the fence of, I'm not sure, I'm frustrated with maybe how things have been, what would you say to them?
I would say to them, I understand your frustration. You have a right to be frustrated. But if you honestly think that you could do it all by yourself, you're sadly mistaken. It is a huge mistake. It'll be a big fiscal error that you've made, as well as losing the identity as well. I honestly don't think the majority of Albertans would want to go there. But if you do, it is a nightmare you do not want to visit upon yourself. I think exercise your frustration, do it the correct way, work with other provinces, build alliances, build allegiances, and then be able to go to the federal government and say, this is what we, not I, what we want to have done in order to build the Canadian economy and the Canadian nation. And I think that's the proper way to go. But I truly do understand, coming from the West myself, their frustration in this regard. That pipeline should have been done years ago. We shouldn't even be having this discussion. And I'm hopefully, with what's going on now, the new meetings coming soon in Saskatchewan, that Mark Carney and the premiers will be able to sit down and realize that we need to think as a country and not an individual in this regard.
Well, on that front,
Hopefully.
I'm not sure if you saw it. I believe it was today that Bloc leader Yves Francois Blanchet made a bit of a joke saying in terms of, I don't have many tips for Albertans on how to do it. I can tell you how not to do it, because obviously that has been kicking around there. I thought that was quite funny. But thank you for that message for Albertans, and I really appreciate your time, sir, and it was a great being able to connect with you again. Thank you for joining us.
Well, I appreciate your time, and my very best to all your listeners and to your viewers and their families. Thank you.
Thank you. Peter Stoffer, former NDP, a member of Parliament. Thank you for watching. Again, we'll be back right after this break. You're watching Merit TV Canada. Well, welcome back to Merit TV Canada. I thought the message that Peter Stoffer was putting out at the end was a great one. And I think that message can be for all Canadians. That if we can find ways to work together as citizens, to be able to look at each other, to not judge each other based on what we think each other might think, but to find out actually where people stand on specific issues, not to box each other in and put labels on each other. I believe that Canada has got the absolutely fundamental elements that it needs to be an amazing nation that is robust in strength economically, where its citizens have opportunity to thrive, where we can create an environment. But what that takes is the right leadership, but also what it takes is the right citizen base to be able to have those constructive conversations, to criticize where need to be, to hold leadership to account, to be able to move forward and express our interests without being vulgar or volatile, but to be strong in our convictions at the same time, but realize that we are all Canadians. I know that there is growing sentiment in Alberta, and obviously Quebec has been around for a long time, and in Saskatchewan. This is nothing new to Canada. I do hope and I do respect the fact that Albertans and people might need to move forward in this idea of independence and moving that direction. And if it happens and it actually goes that far, so be it. I think most Canadians, and especially myself, will accept the outcome of what it is. But I am hopeful that we can find ways to mend, and we'll have to hold and talk to the federal government and also hold our Premier, Danielle Smith, to account to be able to represent if there is that majority of people or that threshold number that's broken. But the fundamental message about Canada being strong and finding ways to work together and not being so separate, I hope that we can get back to that, because I think we have lost that balance of power in federation between provincial and federal, where there is more federal that is stepping on some of the province's toes, but not just, it's maybe an understatement, but it's actually held back Albertans and their ability to thrive and move forward and be represented. Anyway, something for all of us to think about and take forward. Thank you for watching this evening. You're watching Merit TV Canada.